Blood composition. This is simply what makes up our blood. So we just see it as being a red fluid. There's a number of things that are going on in that fluid. We've got four components. We've got our red blood cells, which are known as erythrocytes. We've got white blood cells, which are known as leukocytes, platelets, and lastly plasma. Your blood is mainly made up of these four things, and all have separate jobs. So looking at erythrocytes then, there are millions of red blood cells in the body, all dying and all being remade as quickly as possible. They've got a disc shape, which allows the oxygen to be carried and it can flow through the blood quite easily. They're made in the bone marrow. Now, the cell itself contains a red pigment or a red coloured protein called hemoglobin, and that is what makes blood red. So the hemoglobin has a very good job, and it's that of which helps to bind to oxygen. So the red blood cell doesn't, it is in fact clear until you fill it with this hemoglobin protein. And the hemoglobin has this affinity to want to attach to oxygen. Once it does attach, it changes the colour of it, and that then becomes called oxyhemoglobin. That's quite an important thing to remember come exam time. Your transport of oxygen to the tissues, that's his main job, is to take this oxygen to tissues and help with the flow of all the other things. Your white blood cells, I'll show this video in class, but your white blood cells quite simply are there to basically look after any bacteria and kill off anything that doesn't deserve to be there. So these are quite large, and they've got a nuclei, of which is the brain of our of that particular cell. So it will act as the body's defense system, so it fights infections. And what it does is it sniffs out these bacteria and then chases it down. So it will surround and then consume these harmful microbes. And this is why it's important to have things like your vaccinations and things like that. So the white blood cells recognize what certain diseases look like and then knows how to kill it. So some will also produce chemicals called antibodies that can fight infection whilst you're, say, suffering from a cold or the flu. But these only account for 1% of blood volume. So it is quite important to keep your nutrition to a really good level. So having good vitamins and minerals helps to look after these white blood cells. And these are also produced in the bone marrow. Your platelets are these strange looking things here. These are a bit like plugs, really. They're there to just look after any injuries that we might have. They are formed in the red bone marrow. They're known as thrombocytes, and they produce something called thrombokinase, which is a chemical, a bit like glue, and it helps to do blood clotting. So what will happen is the thrombokinase will be released, the blood platelets will then stick together around any gaps in any blood vessels or tissues or torn muscle or something like that to try and close a wound up, and that will prevent any kind of blood loss. This can happen externally or internally. So if you ever form a scab of some sort, they're actually just blood platelets, and what they're trying to do is a very important job, and that is to start allowing it's to stop blood getting out so that the body can bring nutrients to the injured area to rebuild. So picking your scabs isn't going to do you any favours. Plasma makes up most of the blood. All right, it's 90% water. It has like a bit of a yellowy tinge to it, and this is simply the fluid that all the other cells float around. Now it contains some important electrolytes, sodium, potassium, to name a few, magnesium, and a number of proteins that help to transport around the body. It will also carry glucose and waste products. So this is just the kind of the fluid that pushes things around the body. So there's a quick breakdown of what we've just covered there. Notice with white blood cells, they're known as leukocytes. Now, you may be familiar with the disease known as leukemia. So, white blood cells help to fight infection. Leukemia is a terrible disease that has an effect with things like white blood cells, and people don't necessarily die from leukemia all the time. It's usually because they have leukemia, they'll die of something really small like a cold or the flu or something like that. Finally, the lymphatic system. So this image here shows us a number of vessels. So the green there to try and be different from blood vessels, but what you've got around the body are these small little what are known as lymph nodes. So you've got lymph nodes under your armpits, you've got them your pelvic lymph nodes, you've got your lymph nodes in your neck, and what these do is they simply store any waste products that have been needed to be removed from the body. So it's a very special drainage system. So any toxins that we create or anything that we consume that the body doesn't like, it will try to remove it through the lymphatic system. So it carries a fluid called lymph, which can hold infection-fighting white blood cells. And that will be very, very important in terms of killing anything that needs to be killed. And any toxins that are in there are eventually taken out of the body and pushed into the waste system to be removed.